This is the Outliers Edge podcast, where we champion the leaders who are shaping the next era of humanity by taking them to the edge of their comfort zone so that they can lead us to the edge of what's next. I'm your host, Niiamah Ashong. Let's do this. Hey there, Outliers. Niiamah here, and today you get to be a fly on the wall with a conversation I had with Nicky Davies. Nicky is someone who I have found to be incredible in terms of the world of leadership, and also just as an outlying peer. We've had conversations in the past that have expanded my thinking and realistically led me to see in new lights what connection really means for me, what relationship really means for me, how I want to create that as a leader, and how I can just create more of what I want in a shorter, more fulfilled amount of time. So today we came together and I invited Nicky to come onto the Outliers Edge podcast. And at the time of the recording, we had been doing our podcast conversations that in a more of like an interview, exploring your journey kind of style, where it's like, tell us about where you've been and what brought you to this point. And as Nicky and I were setting up for the conversation, she brought up how she was looking at potentially changing the style of her podcast going forward, and getting closer to alignment with the way that she interacts in the world and where insights and real growth comes from her. And she brought up in that moment that it was really around having conversations with people and really being in interaction. And so for me, I know one of my styles is to give people an experience of the future that they're looking. I love to be like create the sandbox. Like, let's just practice it here. Let's try it out here. I don't mind. Like this could be a really awesome way to have conversation. So today you get to be a fly on the wall of Nicky and I just being in conversation, and seeing as we're both experimenting with a new style of creating resources for our communities, as well as just a new style of cultivating growth within one another. One of the benefits of this conversation is that we're in it for us, and the benefit of that there, what I mean by that is like, we're not coming at this from the standpoint of two gurus trying to teach things to people about how it has to be. You're actually going to see us in our process of exploration, see us asking questions of each other, not because to get to the core, to get to the essence of standing up into thought leadership, to get into the core of choosing of putting out your voice and your message out into the world. And you get to hear some of both how we went about it, and how we, I don't know, just with us in real time. You're in real time about it, and you don't. For me, I find that more valuable than seeing the polished elements after everyone's done and they're on their book tours, trying to talk about everything as though they know it. For us as Outliers, we're on our edge. We are on our edge. We're stepping into new territories. We're stepping into places that we haven't been there before, regardless of if anyone else has been there. And as a result of that, here, these types of conversations where we allow things to emerge are incredibly valuable to give us different nuggets, takeaways, and insights that we can then apply to our journey. So without further ado, I'm so excited that you get to come and be a participant in this conversation. And Nicky extends an invitation at the end of the conversation for anyone to continue the conversation with us in a certain way. So when you get to the end of the conversation, make sure to look at that, and let's not just have it be a one-off thing, but instead let it continue to grow. It's one of the best parts about the world that we live in right now. It's not that hard to take what could have been 1 hour in time and turn it into something that people can participate in on an ongoing basis. So I'm excited for you to enjoy this episode. Take a comment, and then we'll take it from there. I'll see you soon.
Yeah, sorry.
Can you hear me? Yeah,
I can now.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll dance. We'll dance with that.
Yeah. What I'm going to do? Can I turn my video off? Will that be okay? I know for YouTube that's not great, but
no, we're good. We're good.
Let's see if that makes a difference.
Okay, that sounds good. I'll keep mine on because I like that. I like
Yeah.
I can see myself as self-view on, so I'll turn off self-view. But I do like that element of it all. So, and Nicky, so my ask is, as without the video, I have a little bit less information as to like how you're processing and when you want to speak. So my invitation, my ask, actually, my request is just like interrupt as you need to.
Sure.
And yeah, we'll just let things flow from there.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I'm like, so since I brought up like repurposing and like translating and such, I'm curious what came to you, what intrigued you about that, like where are things developing for you with that idea?
Well, I think when you were talking about the reason why you set up your podcast and the fact that it is about serving people and providing resources, that's really where I was coming from in terms of setting up my own podcast. And like I said to you, I've been doing it for 15 months now. And I've noticed that there are some conversations that I've had. I call them conversations, they're not interviews, you know. So there are some conversations with people that I've had that have been absolutely fabulous. And it's because we've got into a conversation. We've got past what you were talking about earlier about, you know, I've come here to promote a book, or I've come here to promote a service. And I do that in the form of being on your podcast and talking about it. And those episodes are the ones where we've taken the conversation and we've gone deeper, have had the best kind of feedback, because people could relate to what was being said, and they really appreciated the depth. So when I think about repurposing, it's those magical moments, those kind of golden nuggets that you get in the conversation. We've had many of those in our conversations that we haven't recorded. And it is pure magic. And that interaction is where you pull something. It's like pulling a rabbit out of the top hat. You know, it's just something that you weren't planning on. It just happened. And the magic is in that moment, if that makes sense.
Oh, Nicky, I think as a general default, what you say makes sense for me. It's really nice hearing you say it out loud. One, because there's an element, and there's an element of self-trust where I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I'm feeling. That's exactly how I feel about it. There's another element of like, and I'm not the only one that craves that. So I recognize for myself how much I know where the bullseye is. I know exactly where the center is. Maybe I can't always articulate it, but like I know where the North Star is. And I'll tend to circle around it as opposed to just going straight for it, because I'm like, well, if I reach out to people and I don't know them and they don't know me, like, are they going to want to just like have a conversation with me? Like the interview is a really like easy way to bring them into my world. And then maybe after we've had that conversation, maybe then we can have the real conversation that I actually want to have.
Yeah.
And as I hear you say this, there's a few things that are playing out for me, which is I think that there are people who not only would love to listen, would love to learn and grow. Like, and I think there's a growth element that really comes from it. I think that there are people who would love to be invited into that space where they can just talk and be challenged and just allow. The word emergent comes to mind. Have an emergent conversation, as opposed to a convergent conversation. Where it's like, we need, like, you came in, here's a specific topic, here's a specific 3 bullets that you're going to talk about, and nothing's going to stray around it. Like, this is the only outcome that can come from that conversation. At that point, I'm like, please just record it on your own and then send it to me. Because there's no need for me to be here for this to take place. So that's one of the things, like on a personal note, I'm recognizing like how much I desire what you're saying, and the flexibility, and really just the like, I love the serendipity, what can come out of something more than what we know will come out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's something about the power of asking the right questions, or a better question, isn't there? And I love the way that you talked about going round rather than going direct, because there's so many different experiences that we all have in the world, isn't there? And we all put our own interpretation on them. And when we're having a conversation with somebody, they may be talking to us about an experience, and we've created a very different picture or idea of what that experience is in our own minds based on our own experiences. And it's not until you ask questions that you can melt that image away and actually form the image that fits with what the person is looking to convey in their story. And that's a really powerful moment. It's a real learning moment. Like you say, it's about growth. Yeah.
So like, I would love to play with that then. And like, because I'm hearing from you, like, not only is it just, it's a deep conversation, not only is it conversation that has room for whatever needs to emerge, but it's a conversation that's led with curiosity and led with questions in a way that allows what the person is really trying to say to come out and come out even more fully. And one last thing I'll say, you did not say this, but I'll say this from my experience. For the person that's listening or paying attention, like coming to it later on, looking at the resource later on, what they get out of that experience might be completely different than what either of the two people in the conversation, or whoever many were in the conversation, were getting or even thought they were trying to convey. I think that's why you'll notice with me in conversations, and I love to ask some questions here. I'm going to bring in some of that to play with this, and like, I'm like, well, if Nicky's great at this, let's do that. But you notice with me, like, I'll express a lot of what's happening inside, because normally when I'm listening or I'm interacting with people, I don't get to know I don't get to see the outside, like, demeanor or the external results, and I'm typically really, really curious about like who they needed to be in order to create that, or the places where it looks like confidence, but it's actually courage in that moment. And there's those elements here where, for me, getting to the core of what's there, that becomes really exciting for me. So let me ask you here, like, we're talking about we'll leave the world of podcasting behind. We're talking about the resources that you'd love to like create, like the resources you love to create in the way that you love to create it. Like, so I'm hearing that you're in this exploration of what it could be. Like, if you were going to just go the direct path to it, what, like, ideally, what would that look like for you? As much as you can, just tell me what starts to come to mind. Let's do this. It's 15 months later from now. It's 15 months later from this conversation right now. And you're looking back and you're like, I've been having a lot of fun, and people have been really getting a lot from the resources that I've been putting out in the form of these conversations recently, over the last 15 months. Like, tell me, what does that resource look like?
Well, interestingly enough, it started already. I'm actually writing a report on my take on leadership. And that's something that's become even more important over the years, because I've been working the past 17 years in my own business, developing inspired leaders in 22 different countries around the world, 70 different, more than 70 different organizations. And during that time, I've never once said what my take on leadership is. 17 years, and I've never once said what my take on leadership is. And so for me, I'm at a point where, and it's interesting that you talk about courage and confidence. I'm at a point now where I want to put those ideas on paper. I want to capture it in some way and share it with the world. So it's fascinating, isn't it, that we're having this conversation right now when this is part of, you know, a process, a journey that I'm on. And I've only really recently started that. So for me, 15 months from now, what that would look like is, well, I know what my take on leadership is now, and I'm actually writing it now, and feel very clear and actually very confident about it too, which is just amazing, because I never thought I could be in that space where I feel confident saying what I think it is. And I'll tell you what that's about. And I'm sure people listening to this will be able to identify with this. So for a long time, 17 years, I've been talking about leadership and using all the models that are out there, particularly the ones that I had a strong affinity to. And I would hide behind them. Yeah. So they were safe. Somebody else had done the thinking for me. And while they weren't perfect, while they weren't true to everything that I thought was important, they were close enough. Okay. And then as I started to think about what's the legacy I want to leave behind, or how do I continue this in a meaningful way beyond the people that I've impacted to date, you know, where is that resource that somebody can go to that, or point to, you know, it might be, I don't know, an executive that I've coached. They can say, oh, you know, Nicky was a phenomenal coach. I got X, Y, Z from working with her. And this is her take on leadership. They can actually point to it, you know, and say, if you, and this isn't an ego thing, but if you want to see something different, something that will make you sit up and take notice of what's going on in your organization right now, and what are the issues that you need to address, you need to read this. So it's interesting you're asking this question. So 15 months from now, yeah. I see this, this report being received. It's not going to be liked by everybody, and I'm really okay about that. But it's out there. And once it's out, there's no taking it back. Yeah.
So let's slow down a little bit on this just right here. I can't tell if you're paused or if you're complete. Is there more that you want to say?
No, that's I'm complete for now.
Yeah. Yeah. How does it feel to like just be saying that even just with me? I'm not worried. I don't know if anyone's ever going to watch this here, but like just with me, how does that feel? How does that feel to say that?
It feels powerful to be able to say that. Yeah. And it's something I've been grappling with for a long time. And it's interesting that I've got to this point where it's just like, you know what? It's almost complete. You know, I'm going to get some feedback, obviously, from the draft that I've put together, but it's almost there now. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that you said that really struck me, there was the element of and it's not ego, one, and the word legacy. It really feels like there's, it feels like there's, well, tell me a little bit more about that. Tell me a little bit more about it from the legacy standpoint for you, like the element of being able to, it almost feels like I'm a practitioner at the core. I'm a leadership practitioner. I learn lots about leadership, and it almost feels like the PhD, you know, where like the PhD program, your job is to add something, a contribution to the body of work that already exists, you know. And it almost feels like in this way, when I hear you talk about this here, this is about me, but it's like I'm going to make a contribution to the field of leadership, to the study of leadership and the practice of leadership, with some additional concepts or way of looking at it, or ways of approaching it that will help future leaders or current leaders who resonate with this or want to take this down. How much of that is when you think about legacy, when you think about what's really driving you here, tell me a little bit about like what you see coming behind it.
Yeah, I think the tipping point for me has really been the lockdowns that we've experienced, and how organizations, in March 2020, suddenly had to equip everybody and make sure that they had what they needed to work from home. And a lot of attention was paid to employees at that time. And there's something called engagement scores, employee engagement scores and assessments that larger organizations do, usually on a 6-monthly basis. Some more frequent than that and some less frequent than that, but usually on about a 6-monthly basis. Yep. And what they saw is the employee engagement surveys, the scores went up in 2020 and stayed up at the beginning of 2021. And then after the first quarter of 2021, they started to drop back down again. And we saw people leaving organizations in droves, and that's still going on today. And the rhetoric that was coming out about leadership was, well, we've just got to be more empathic, we've got to be more compassionate, and that will sort it out. And I don't think that's the answer. So,
like, I'm really curious, Nicky. Like, what do you think is the answer? Where does the answer kind of live for you?
Well, you see, I go back to the idea that in order to survive and thrive as organizations, and we're kind of mini organizations, aren't we, as families and as people?
Yeah. Oh, I keep going. Yes, I'm with you on that.
Yeah. So in order to thrive, if you put too much emphasis on empathy and compassion, it smothers people, and so it's really got to be a balance of support and challenge, because it's where support and challenge, that kind of knife edge, is where we actually thrive. And it goes back to your point about growth and learning. It's at that point. So what we're seeing right now is a lot of people, a lot of well-intended leaders saying, well, we just need to be more empathic, we need to be more compassionate, and that will solve things. But it's not where innovation lies, and it's not where growth lies either. So I guess I felt compelled to, and there is something about timing, isn't there? I just felt compelled to actually say no. And this is what I think we need to be doing for our organizations to really thrive, and for our people, for our people to be innovative, to have that spirit of adventure, to really believe in our people and provide opportunities for them to shine within these organizations, to ask great questions, and give timely feedback, and do all the things that we know works really well to bring people to that point of growth and development. So yeah, it's been quite an experience for all of us, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. I'm taking in what you're saying, and it reminds me of a conversation I had the other day. I was talking to a client, and they brought up something around the lines of, like, as employees, like, employees want to work. There's no, like, there isn't a desire to not work. Like, we want to see the work go out in the world. We want to see growth. We want to see the fruits of our labor, you know. And when you're saying this here, it just takes me to, it took me back to that conversation as we were discussing, where efforts were being made by the organization that may not have necessarily been bearing fruit. And you know, you've identified how a lot of people are talking about like bringing more empathy and compassion, and that's an effort that may not be bearing fruit anymore. And you did say something, Nicky, that I do want to call out, because you said as organizations survive and thrive, and you said them like as though they are coupled together. Later on, you started using the word thrive, but I am kind of curious from your standpoint in terms of what you're seeing in leadership when you look at this here. I look at them as different areas. Like it almost feels like in 2020 we were in survival mode. Everyone was. Everyone was in survival mode, and we did things to support a sense of survival. What do we need to do to make sure that we know that we can survive this experience, and you are safe, you know? And now I feel like you're entering a territory of like, it's not just business as usual, but there's a certain way, there's a different I think about things in variables. So it's the same formula, but at that time we needed more empathy, compassion at that time because of the state we were in. And now as the businesses are opening up, things are becoming a little bit more stable, still uncertain, but you know, we can see with a little bit more purview and such. The formula is changing. The variables, the formula is the same, but the variables in it, the amount that you need of different things are necessary to get back into innovation, to get back into growth. You're not just trying to survive anymore. We're looking, people are in a place of saying, where can I thrive once again?
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it, that you use that word safe, because safety is an illusion.
Tell me more. I'm curious about the illusion of safety overall or in the workplace.
Overall and in the workplace.
Okay, Nicky. All right, I'm curious. Tell me a little bit more.
Yeah, well, and if I take it back to the workplace again, I think that's what's happening, and why people are talking about let's bring more empathy and compassion into it, because that feels safe. But actually, thriving, going to that division between survival and thrival, thriving is about taking risks. And there is no such thing as safety. You know, even being an employee in an organization, you think you're playing safe because you're getting a monthly salary, you know, you have a job, you have a contract, but things can change rapidly. And people have experienced this time and time again, haven't they? I haven't personally. Where somebody has been made redundant, you know, and it came out of the blue. It was a complete shock. So this idea, this notion of safety, playing by the rules, you know, playing safe, it doesn't last. It can't last. And actually, innovation isn't about playing it safe. It is about breaking some of the rules. And you see this in startup organizations. You know, there's that, what we call an entrepreneurial mindset, which is very much about taking risks, not stupid risks, but taking risks nonetheless. And then as a startup sort of moves into and becomes more mature and maybe a much bigger organization, then we start to put processes and systems in place. We start to have standard operating procedures. We start to have more rules in place around how we do things around here to get things done in a standard way. But where the innovation lies is in questioning why it's like that. It starts with a why. Then it moves to a what if. What if we looked at it differently? We looked at it like this. What if that happened? Which then moves us on to, well, how about this, which is different? And so if we want to capture that creative problem solving, that innovation, then that comes with risks. It's risky.
You know, I want to explore the risk. I'm glad we're talking about safety and risk, because I actually think that there's a lot to this topic overall. And I'd love to look at this a little bit from the standpoint of leaders. I'd love to get like your take on this. So I can understand, like, as an employee, like where we might think things are safe, and you've gotten a safe job, it's a safe, stable thing, and you know, you can be made redundant. There's no guarantees. I'm curious about your take and your thoughts, and I can share some of mine if it's helpful in this part of the conversation, about like the risks that leaders feel like they're taking. And I know what I'm curious about. It's not about what's the risk to the organization. I'm curious about, like, what is the risk that the leader feels for their individual self, for their own like self of security. That, like, what's the safety that like a leader feels like that goes beyond like, this is what's going to keep the organization all right, and it goes to the individual. I'll say this, I'll put it in like the context that I'm thinking about. Some of the conversations I'm having right now, or I'm talking to leaders, and they're like, how do you manage an organization in a time where if you do something in January, it could be cheered, but then if you do, but like the same thing in March might be considered offensive to someone, like might be taken the wrong way. You might get canceled at any moment. Like, and like, I'm really curious about your take on that right now, because it feels really like in the conversations I have, like it feels very present in terms of leaders making decisions that, let's say that it's part of the canvas that shows up sometimes in the decisions that are then rationed, like made rationalized. There it is, rationalized as it's good for the business. And so I'm kind of curious, like, if you focus on the leader themselves and the risk and the safety that they feel, I'm curious about like any thoughts you have on that, or what you're seeing might come into play from that perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because leadership is about being able to see paradoxes. And what you're talking about is a paradox. You've got to be able to hold both those things at the same time, you know, and work with both of them at the same time. And there's no certainty. So you're managing uncertainty.
Yeah. If it's that puts a smile on my face, by the way. I want you to continue. But I'm someone who tends to lean into uncertainty and ambiguity. In particular, like if I've worked at startups, I've worked at like, you know, top 4 consulting companies as well. And it's like that element of uncertainty, the element of ambiguity. That's both like, it feels that at least in the last 2 years, that's been a lot of the conversation. How do we deal with uncertainty? And it almost seems to you're like, that's just the definition of being a leader.
It is. It really is.
Yeah.
And just facing the fact that you're going to get it right 50% of the time, and you're going to get it wrong 50% of the time. It just is. That's the price you pay to be a leader.
Really like
that. Yeah, so that's where I am. You know, what I was saying about for 17 years, I've been hiding behind these leadership models, you know, and kind of talking about them. Yeah. And like now it's, okay, Nicky, you talk about leadership. You're not happy about well-intentioned leaders saying about empathy and more compassion and an overemphasis on that. Do something about it. So, yeah. That's exactly where I am right now. And I know that 50% are going to love what I say and 50% are absolutely going to hate it.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm still going to do it.
Well, that's what's necessary in different ways to like really make an impact, right? To really be able to leave something that is distinct. I spend a lot of my time, like, you know, I talk about outliers and things like that. I'm like, I know what it's like to be in the minority and to be able to still thrive somehow in that minority, you know? And so what's lovely is like what I'm hearing from you is there's language here that goes beyond being resilient. There was a time, by the way, that like when people would mention the word resilient, I'm like, I would cringe because almost
Me too.
my version of that would be like, look, if we're going to teach anything, resiliency is not that. It's like, it's a cool tool to have, but I would rather you help, like if we're going to put effort into it, why don't we help people not get knocked down in the first place? You know, it's like if resiliency is your ability to bounce back up, like why aren't we working on the tools that doesn't get someone to have to fall down in the first place from something that may not be all that serious, right? Or all that detrimental. You know, it's like it's just uncertainty, y'all. You know. So there's an element of what you're saying where I like the boldness in it, and I like the boldness in it not because it's objectively bold, Nicky. It's the boldness is that it is yours. It is like there's one person out of the 7 billion people on this planet that has these specific thoughts. And you're like, I'm putting them out there and I'm putting out in this way. And some people are going to love it. Some people are not going to love it. And that's fine. But it's going to be added to even just having this conversation with you has opened up different doors to, for me to say, oh, I'm going to be 3% more courageous or 3% more confident in what it is that I want to do. And when I get to a specific standpoint, I get to choose. Do I want to choose the path of growth, innovation? Am I choosing safety right now? Like just even being exposed to there's another way of doing this. And here goes the real ask of the leader. Like this is not a special time per se, other than a time where it's like, yes, there's even more uncertainty. And guess what? That's what you signed up for. So you should, so all the time, you're constantly building that skill to like, if you really are signed up to be a leader, you're constantly building that skill. You're constantly looking at navigating this, and you're helping people do this. And so let's not try and create an environment where everything is certain or feels safe. And then we move forward. It's really, and don't let me put words in your mouth. I'm just really in the dance of this with you here, but it's really around like the idea of like, you're like, as a leader, uncertainty comes with the territory. So let's help you navigate that and make sure that you don't end up accidentally going back on the side of survival when the world is asking for you as a leader to help us thrive. Is how true is that? Am I like, take it real quick, and then we'll wrap up our conversation for today, at least for now. But there's some really great things in what you're saying.
That's exactly it. Beautifully summarized.
It feels, I get excited. We'll have some additional conversations, I think, in the future conversations. I would love to talk. I love to talk about your journey to this. Like, 17 years you've been out there, like you said, like hiding behind other people's models and frameworks of leadership, what they say it is, and now you're out there on your path to put out your element. That part right there, Nicky, really, really intrigues me. I wanted to have a part of like the leadership, like conceptual conversation, like the practice of it all. But this stage here of like, you've been someone who's like helped over 70 organizations in over 22 different countries and so on and so forth. And now you're like, wait a minute, it's time for me to walk my path on this one here. It's time for me to be visible. Like that right there, Nicky, that's just, lights me up. That's where I would love to say, and I'm just going to ask you, how can I support you in that? How can I support you in that? It may be after the report comes in, it might be playing with you to help unpack some ideas, but how can I support you with that? Because this is you're stepping into the path of, this is Nicky's path alone. And she's going to be visible as her through it. Love it or leave it. Like, this is what she stands for. That gets me up. That gets me up in the morning. So how can I support you?
Well, let's continue the conversation. I would love to do that.
All right. Let's do that then. I like that. I think like going back with the idea of these just being resources for our communities as well as being resources for us, right? I love the idea. right now I'm moving what was my quote unquote podcast from an interview podcast to a coaching podcast. I'm like, I want to get more into, I want to have more conversations. And I have found that there are very powerful conversations that I have that take place in the form of a coaching session. Like, then let me just do that. Let me go direct to that. You know, let me find different opportunities for this to come to play. So on my end here, I'm excited to, how do I say this? I get excited at the prospect of us. All right, this is what I want to say. The reason I love the coaching conversations is because it gives people an insight into how people are thinking and brings up the elements of courage, or where safety might be coming into play and they don't really realize it, or, you know, so on and so forth. It brings up these internal things. The depth, the deeper we go, the more universal it is, because we all have feelings, right? And what I love about this year is that in a few years, people are going to see your report, and they're going to follow your podcast. You're going to follow all the resources you put out there, and they're going to be like, of course, this is what Nicky says in the world. Like, this is how it is. But they're going to miss the transition point when you are actually stepping into this here. And that transition point for me, I think, is really, really awesome to just almost capture some of the process as it's going as it's taking place. And so I get excited to keep having conversations.
Really raw.
Yeah.
It's really raw. And I think that's the fascinating thing for myself, you know, sort of looking at it as well. It's a fascinating place to be, but it's not a scary place, which is really interesting.
Oh, that's absolutely fantastic. Yeah. All right, Nicky. Well, I'm looking forward to continuing to have these conversations. Anything else working through you that we should just put into this space before we close this space down for today?
Well, I guess I just hope that if you're listening to this, you realize that you can be on the same path too, your version of the path. Yeah. And I would love to hear from people who are walking this path too, you know, at the same time as we are.
What's the best way for them to reach out to you, to get in touch, to share some of this with you? And
probably LinkedIn. Okay. I'm quite easy to find on LinkedIn. You know, it's Nicky J. Davis with an E. Find me on LinkedIn.
All right, awesome. So
or through you.
Absolutely. Well, I think the element of like, you're looking forward to hearing how other people are going on their path. I'm like, that's just the world that I live. I'm out there in the world curating and finding these people and bringing us into spaces and conversations where we're out here actively sharing this. And there's like, I know you do really powerful work, and you're leading and living by example. And that is, I'm excited for people to spend time sharing and growing and being curious around the journey with you as well. So Nicky, I'm thrilled for this conversation. I'm looking forward to our next one, and just to keep building off from this.
Yeah.
Awesome. Ready to play at your edge? Come join us inside of the Outliers Edge multiverse, where you have the opportunity to come for 14 days and play in the sandbox of your unique leadership style and take everything about you to its next edge. Go to outliersedge.com/OE guest pass in order to receive your 2-week gift.